Welcome back to the Stephen Knight Show. Our next guest is award-winning fiction author who will soon release the first book in the Detective Tony Pantera series, Hell is Empty. Please help me welcome the talented Charles Tabb. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. So this is your second career, really, because you taught for 3 decades. And
yes.
And you said in doing so, you learned how to tell a good story. Can you talk about that?
Well, when you're teaching students how to write and you're teaching them about literature and you study the literature, you find that there are certain things that make stories work. And in doing that, I just, over 30 years, basically, I actually, when I was a child, I wanted to be a writer, but I also wanted to put food on the table.
Right. Exactly.
So, I just, I paid attention to the literature. And when you're teaching kids about the literature, if you're going to teach it, you have to know a lot about it.
Yeah.
And so just the process of doing that for over and over for years, I think made me more aware of what makes a good story and what makes a good book. I may have sent you some information that wasn't quite correct. I actually have 2 books in the detective series already out.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Hell is Empty is out. The second one's out, The Perjure. I've got a literary novel that's been out, and it's actually the one that's made me actual money.
Oh, okay.
And it's called Floating Twigs.
Yes, that was your debut, right?
That was my first. That was my first one, and I got really lucky.
Yeah.
Word of mouth really spread on the internet, and people were buying it like crazy a few months ago. But those things, what goes up must come down. But
that was based off of an incident that happened to you when you were around 11 years old.
Yes, that's correct.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, when I was actually, I remember the exact day.
And this was in Florida, right? Florida.
Yeah, it was in Florida. I grew up in the Panhandle of Florida on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
And people who read the book, if they've been to the area, they'll recognize the towns I'm actually talking about. But I set it, the setting of the book there, because of just familiarity for one thing. But when it was Labor Day of 1966, which gives my age. I was turning 11 in just a couple of weeks. I knew it was Labor Day because it was the day before school started.
Right. Exactly.
And so 2 friends and I went out fishing. There was a beached barge out across on this like a barrier island area that sort of came out and formed a natural harbor for fishing boats. And we went across to this barge because we figured we could catch some fish off of the barge where they were coming around it. And we got out there, and literally the first chapter, the first half of it is based on the actual events that happened while we were there. And while we were there, we were fishing, and a starving dog came up over the dunes. And when I say starving, I mean this dog looked like it hadn't eaten in 2 months, man. It was starving.
Yeah.
Just skin and bones, but very friendly. And one of my friends, who is the person I sort of base the life situation for Jack, my protagonist who tells the story, I based it sort of on his life. His parents were alcoholics. They were, nice people.
Right.
They were just alcoholics,
Yeah.
They were sort of married to their drinks,
Yeah.
He wanted to adopt the dog. And so we took the dog and took it to his house. And you got to realize, man, I'm not even 11 years old yet. I'm a couple of weeks short of 11.
Exactly.
So are they, basically. They're like 10, 11 years old. And as we're going up and we get to the house, the dad is sitting out there drinking a beer.
Having a drink, right?
Yeah. And it's
too fashion.
It's late in the afternoon, and it was Labor Day, Monday.
Yeah.
He wasn't working at all, and so he had, shall we say, had some drinks.
Right. Yeah.
Drink. And he took one look at the dog when the kid asked to adopt it. And he goes, "That dog's suffering." Well, you can guess what he did. He went in the house, he comes out, and this is like a small residential town,
right.
at that time anyway. And he goes in, gets a rifle, and comes out and shoots the dog right in front of us.
Oh my gosh.
And I was so traumatized, I literally never told anybody about that. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my brothers, anybody about what happened. But at the same time, I was intrigued about, because, especially a 10-year-old, almost 11-year-old mind, he wouldn't be suffering if you fed him. That's what I'm thinking.
Right, we just fed him.
Yeah. And I mean, I grew up loving dogs anyway, and the guy just shot the dog right in front of us, and I thought to myself, what if the kid had been able to adopt the dog? And that story grew out of that idea. And I tell people when I talk about this, I make sure they understand that this is a good example of how something good can come from a bad traumatic event in your life. Because I mean, I wrote this book, man. I mean, it's a
rave reviews.
And
you said
it's gotten a lot of reviews that are great.
And you said this is your personal masterpiece.
Yes.
Do you think a little part of you, maybe even prior to writing that book, that traumatic experience did you feel healed from it by writing the book? That story?
Yeah. It was very cathartic. It allowed me to sort of choose a different path that dog would have had. Because the dog, I mean, it was starving. Not only that, he had 3 legs. He had one amputated at one point in his life.
Wow.
And so what I did was, of course, the literary aspect of it is I made the dog sort of symbolic of Jack, my hero in the book, in the sense of Jack was handicapped by his situation in life. He was poverty stricken, and his parents were both alcoholics and that kind of thing. He kind of raised himself in a sense. And then there's this dog, and they kind of both become whole and healthy together in a sense. And the title Floating Twigs is taken from where Jack likes to float twigs down the road wash when it rains, and he'll go out in the storms and stuff because his parents don't care,
Right.
And he goes out and he'll float twigs, and he watches them, he follows them along, and there's like a gutter on his road where he lives, and where the water goes into the gutter, it eventually, a lot of it makes its way out to the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And his idea is, he wonders how many of the twigs that make it as far as the gutter make it as far as the Gulf of Mexico to float freely on the open waters of the Gulf.
Wow.
And so it becomes a metaphor.
That's a metaphor of life.
So it's just, it's just all just came together. And I've had a number of readers compare it to Kill a Mockingbird.
Wow.
In fact, the blurb on the back of the jacket, the back here, the little write up on it, a writer friend, a friend of mine who's a writer, an author, wrote that for me. And the first line he had was where the red fern grows meets To Kill a Mockingbird.
Wow.
So, I was like, whoa,
Wow.
I'm in high cotton here,
That's really nice.
Man.
So you've had 2 short stories that have received awards.
Yes.
And then several of your stories have been published on various online literary journals.
Yes.
So and one of these awards, receiving the rave reviews and everything that's come from your writing, was that confirmation to you that this is my second career? This is what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah. I do suffer like every writer. I don't care who they are, from Stephen King on down, David Baldacci, James Patterson, any of them all suffer at times from imposter syndrome. They think I'm not really that good. Even the people like them, they still have this there's this little thing in the back of their minds
That doubt.
that tells them they're not that good. And I still have that myself.
What do you think that is?
Do
you think because, because that's a form of art, obviously. I know sometimes when people release art, it's being vulnerable. And so is it the doubt that people will like that vulnerable part of you that, that's like, I do music. So release new music. Always when it's that nerves initially, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that could very well be a big part of it. Cause I mean, it'd be nice if everybody who read it gave it 5 stars, but when you have over 5,000 reviews and ratings, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And what I do is at least back when I could go into schools and talk to people, I would go to schools and talk to students in English classes and creative writing classes and things like that about the process of writing. And I would sort of base it, I'd center my talk around setting goals, and achieving goals. And because you talk to any high school kid or something, and you show them a book that thick and you wrote it, they're like, wow, you wrote that.
Right, yeah.
And I would always bring the manuscript, and I was showing the manuscript, and the manuscript on 8.5 by 11 is about 290 pages, a little under it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like 287. And I told him, I said, if you wrote 1 page a day and that's all, how many days would it take you to write the 287 pages? Well, even the mathematically challenged knew, 287. And my next question was, how many days are in a year? And then it's funny how you would see their jaws almost just drop at the realization of they could write something like that in a year's time if they chose to do that, if that's where they went. But the thing is I would go and talk to students, and they would always ask me about the negative reviews. How do you feel about negative reviews? I said, well, I don't like them,
Right.
And I'm not going to sit here and say,
bring on those negative reviews.
Give me one star.
Can't wait to read them. Right. Exactly.
But and what I would do is I would say, I said, they bother me. I said, but at the same time, you have to realize that not everybody's going to love what you do.
Exactly.
I said, and I would ask them, I said, do you have a song that you really like, but you have a friend that that doesn't particularly care for the song?
Exactly.
They understand that. I said, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to something that's an artistic endeavor, you're going to have people who don't like it.
Exactly.
Even if it's great,
But even so, I think the number of people who did write a review, that speaks to itself, because it's one thing if you had 10 reviews and 2 didn't like it, but when you have thousands of people reading, that means they read it. So
it's the low reviews are like less than 5%. We start down,
Exactly.
And so I take heart in that as well.
Exactly.
But you can't control people's tastes. You can't. And some people are not going to like it. It's going to be like, oh, this is too sentimental or whatever. But I'm happy to say that the vast majority are 5-star reviews.
That's great. That's great. Well, let's talk about the Tony Pantera series. So you said you already had Hell is Empty out, and now you're on your third.
Yeah, I'm on my third. Hell is Empty is the first one, and The Perjure is the second one. And I actually take all of the titles for my detective series from Shakespeare. I find something in Shakespeare that deals with what's happening in the book, and I find quotes from it because I've taught a lot of Shakespeare over the years. And I'll find some, because Hell is Empty is a very famous one, actually. Hell is empty and all the devils are here is the quote from The Tempest. The Perjure is from Julius Caesar, and I won't do the whole quote, but it's basically the conspirator saying, we'll kind of, create a situation where we're not murderers, we're purgers. We're getting rid of people that were bad for Rome, kind of thing, But the third one that will be coming out, which I'll be starting after I finish my current book, and I'll talk about it a little bit too.
Okay.
But the third one is called The Whirligig of Time. And it's just, it's kind of, I find these quotations, I'm like, this fits
This is
perfectly.
it. Right. Yeah.
So it's and I won't go into much detail with that one at all, but it's about a young man who takes a very long time to go about killing somebody because of the plan he has. And
Wow.
it's very nearly a perfect murder situation. But there's that one. The Hell is Empty, though, is about a man who obsesses over a young girl, a teenage girl, and kidnaps her. And it's a much more, I mean, the Floating Twigs book, Floating Twigs is for anybody old enough to read a book of that size. It's fine. It's an all audience kind of thing, PG maybe.
Right.
But the other ones, these are much more adult oriented. In fact, the only negative reviews practically I have, most of the negative reviews I have on Hell is Empty are from people who read Floating Twigs, then read Hell is Empty, and
because it's
totally
a whole different genre.
Book.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you should have known on page 1 this was not going to go the way the book did. But there's that, and of course my detective Tony Pantera is, I call him a flawed man with good intentions.
He said he's a likable guy who's learning to accept himself.
Yeah,
it's something a lot of people struggle with, like you said.
Yeah, he's in the process, of learning to accept himself.
Yeah.
And
I think was interesting about him. He's not only is he a detective, he's also a part-time blues piano player.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love a good blues piano.
Yeah.
I'm no good at it, but I love to listen.
Yeah.
And he does that, and he's divorced, 2 daughters. Okay. His older daughter, I won't go into that because that doesn't happen until the second book. But anyway, he's struggling with trying to juggle his career requirements, the things he has to do for his job, and the things he needs to do as a father. And he tries to juggle these, and he doesn't always succeed.
Right. Yeah.
But if even men who are not divorced, that's and women too. They all there are just choices that sometimes have to be made that you don't want to have to make. So that's what I mean when I say he's a flawed person, because he's like everybody. He's got these things he struggles with, so there's that one. The Purger is his first serial killer, but it's a serial killer with a very interesting reason for killing, and that's all I'm going to go into. But anybody likes detective fiction. I've not had any negative reviews on The Purger, but then again, I've not had very many on that one. It just came out this summer, but
they're coming.
It takes a little while,
Right, exactly.
But it's the people who read them, who like detective fiction, definitely have enjoyed those books.
Yeah. And so you said you're currently working on finishing one now. Have you had a lot of time to write, during COVID, pandemic, while we're all at home and trying to social distance? Has that been a good creative space for you?
It's always been an easy thing in terms of being able to write. My big thing is just finding the time, because I've got family obligations and things like that. But I do write some every day. Sometimes I will just go back, because I'm not one of those get through the first draft and then go back and work on it. I'll do a chapter or two, and then I kind of go back and I'm like, well, let's work on this, fix this a little bit. I kind of tinker with it along the way, which I will tell you, most writers tell you that's not how you do it, but I seem to be doing okay with it.
Right. I think everyone has their own style,
because it would bother me. I'll think of something, I'm like, I need to fix that. and it would bother me. I can't do
Right.
So, but I don't have any problems with the writing in terms of that. And I definitely, it's really, I had an interview just the other day. It was a written interview where I answered questions.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the questions was, what do you find the most difficult about writing? And I was like, managing my time.
Right. Yeah.
Really the hardest part about the whole thing. But it's an interesting life. I got to tell you, I really
I
enjoy
can
it.
imagine. Let me ask you, because we're living in crazy times right now with our country seems divided and we have this crazy election cycle. Do you see yourself maybe 5-10 years down the line writing something loosely based off of this time period or something that happened during this time period? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean.
And then let's just say I am not conservative.
I definitely understand. Yes.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that, right?
But I definitely intend to, and a lot of it will be coming up with what would a good story be.
Right, exactly.
Because there are a lot of challenges in terms of the interactions of the characters that will have to take place.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I could write a detective book. I could write a literary book. And I've actually, I'm a multi-genre person. I like to write different kinds of stories and stuff. And I have thought about writing some horror fiction because I also enjoy that. And I was actually thinking, this could really become some good horror fiction too. With this situation, it's already pretty dang scary.
Yes. Could you see if you had to pick a book to go to film that you've written so far, which one would it be?
Floating Twigs.
Yeah.
There are actually a lot of people in their reviews that said this would make a great movie.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like
it. It would be like PG. Which would mean there wouldn't be a big demand to go see it in theaters necessarily, but I think it would be a good artsy kind of movie, artistic endeavor movie.
The streaming services, Amazon and Netflix, all of them.
That I think is where this would go, definitely. So
it's definitely been a pleasure chatting with you. Tell us the best way to keep up. What's on your website? So everything's there. What's the best way?
Yeah, well, if you want to keep up with like my career in terms of what's going on, if you go to my website, charlestabb.com, all one word, of course. And on the first homepage there's a place you can click to sign up for my newsletter. You can check out the books, that I've written. It's got blurbs on all of them, and you can buy them directly from that on the books tab. And it even has the cover and write-up for my coming novel that I hope to have out by Christmas. I hope it's out by Christmas. And it's called Canary's Song. IES apostrophe kind of thing. So, but it's another literary book similar to Floating Twigs. So,
nice. That'll be a good stocking stuffer too.
Yeah. There you go. See, that's why I'm hoping it'll come out by Christmas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Charles, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, our thanks goes out to you. And for more information, go to our website, thestevenknightshow.com. We'll be right back after this.
All right. It's good to have you. Thank you.